My name's Chamatkar Sandhu, and look who I've bumped into. It's none other than UFC Hall of Famer and former light heavyweight champion, Forrest Griffin. Forrest, how are you?
I'm well. Chamatkar Sandhu.
Chamatkar Sandhu.
Chamat, like Chamatkar Sandhu.
Absolutely nailed
I'm
it.
sorry, you probably have to start in every interview like that, right?
Almost,
So you get that right.
almost
I
every
apologize.
interview.
I know. For me, that's like run, Forrest, run. It's
There you
like
go.
I'm Chamatkar Sandhu.
There you go. Well, thank you very much for pointing out the pronunciation of my name. I've never had that before, but I do appreciate it. So, Forrest, it's been a while since I've even...
Well, just so you know, everybody else in their head quietly, they're like, Chamatkar. But yes, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. When was the last time you were actually in the UK?
Geez, it's been a long time. But you just said that. Gosh, I really don't know. It's been a long time. I've been to London and Manchester quite a few times, but not in recent history.
Do you like our city? Do you like London?
I do. I was liking a lot more until I spent 2 hours trying to get back to the hotel last night. And at that point, I was sick of London. I was like, yeah, that's great. I saw London Bridge. I actually want to do a tour of London Bridge. Something like, you guys probably don't realize if you've never been to the States, but we don't see buildings like this old here. There's not as much culture and history. And it's just interesting to me to see like these old cathedrals and buildings and hear the story behind them. I live in Las Vegas, which started in the 1950s, and you come here and you're like, so old for us is like, that building's 12 years old. Oh my God, it's ancient, Here it's like, I was built in the 1500s, 16, Yeah. So I like the old buildings and, kind of the history behind them. It's pretty interesting.
I know.
Oh, yeah, and you guys have beer. Best beer in the world.
Well, maybe the Germans have something to say about that, but you think that we've got the best British, the best beer?
Yeah, you guys both. I'm not a huge fan of German beer. It's Irish and British for me.
What do you make of the current light heavyweight division in the UFC? Obviously, being a former champion yourself and competing in that division, and you didn't retire too long ago. What do you make of the current top 10, top 15 fighters in that division?
I don't really know what you mean. I mean, it's always been a competitive division. It's still as competitive as it ever was now, I'm interested to see what happens with Rashad at his age. I'm interested to see what they do with Cormier. You got the title fight, and then who's the contender? Cormier's only got one win at light heavyweight, and it was a guy I'd never heard of before he fought him. So I don't know. They were trying to give him that test, which would have been Rashad, which would have been a great fight. But unfortunately, guys get hurt when you train fighting. It's a weird thing. You have to actually fight to get good at fighting, which gets you injured. So that breaks the game. We'll see. I'm interested to see the winner of this, who they fight. Maybe they fight Cormier. Maybe, who else is there really?
Well, that's been one of the main kind of talking.
I'm forgetting.
Well, in the light heavyweight division,
yeah.
Well, you've got
Shogun always.
Well, Shogun's dropped down to middleweight now.
Has he?
No, sorry, not Shogun.
Machida.
Machida's dropped down to middleweight. But they've been talking about Shogun for a long, long time, dropping down to middleweight.
You know who hasn't? And I've had this conversation with him too. You know who hasn't been talking about dropping down to middleweight?
Who's that?
Shogun.
There you go.
People are like, oh, you know what? He's kind of small. He's like 5'11", He's not even 6 foot. He's only like 215, 220. He likes being the quicker guy.
Yeah.
And the only time it was really like, wow, he's little is when he fought Jones because of the length, Yeah. But for the most part, actually Gustafsson, he was pretty little against Gustafsson too. But you're talking about the two biggest guys in the division, literally. So, but I'm glad you said that, actually. To me, this is the most interesting the middleweight division has been. When I got into it, it was Rich Franklin, and there were very few real challenges to Rich Franklin, And then it was Anderson Silva, and forget about it. It was Anderson Silva. Yeah. And now, there's so many guys.
Wide open.
Yeah, and I can't even, I'm glad I don't have to determine who gets the title shot, There's a lot of guys that kind of are getting benched and, don't kind of maybe deserve some due, but, obviously Machida's the number one guy. Machida, I thought he could have done all right with Jones again, in a rematch. I thought he could have. I know, when the fight was short, whatever, and he turned that fight down because he didn't have enough time to prepare and his hand was hurt. But, I think he could beat Jones potentially. If there's anybody that could beat Jones besides maybe Gustafsson, him, But it's just an interesting division, you know. What's Vitor going to do? What's he gonna be like after all this is done? Weidman, you know, Weidman is a great matchup. He'll beat Anderson Silva 7 out of 10 times, but you know, how does he do against Machida? You know, that's going to be a test. It's something I saw in Machida's last fight against, what's the guy's name?
Machida's against Musasi.
Musasi.
Yeah.
I saw every time Machida was taken down, which I think was only twice, bam, he popped right back up. You know, which if I'm Chris Weidman and I see how well he gets up and never commits to being on the ground, I'm a little worried.
You've touched on quite a lot there, so I don't know where to kind of like go back to. But you mentioned, no, well, I mean, you talked about Daniel Cormier fighting a guy that you never heard of before, and that's been one of the talking points in the last couple of weeks, where a lot of people don't really think that Daniel Cormier deserves a title shot. You've got some sections of fans that say he does deserve it because he was pretty much in line to get a title shot at heavyweight, and the only reason he declined was that his best friend and training partner, Cain Velasquez, is champion. And then you have another side.
Which is, you know, a valid point.
Yeah. But then you have another section of fans who say, well, you can't just drop a weight class, fight somebody that's not even ranked, and then, you know, ask for a title shot straight away. So where do you think he fits into that division?
Guys do that at 35 and 45, 55 to 45 all the time. You know, you're real good, you drop the weight. You know, Kenny Florian did it at 45. It was a top contender at 55, dropped the weight immediately, title shot. A couple guys have done that, you know. So who's to say you can't?
Would you be comfortable if you were champion?
Here's the beautiful thing. It's really up to the kind of, you know, it's who you beat, and you can earn it, but to an extent, it's the fights fans want to see, you know.
Okay, well, something else you touched upon there was Anderson Silva. He obviously
again, makes the middleweight division very interesting. He won't fight Machida. How does he do against Vitor a second time? I don't think Anderson. I think just matchup-wise, Chris Weidman's bad for him. You know, I think that's just a tough matchup. Like 70% of the time, most of the time, I think Weidman wins somehow. You know. And, you know, Weidman, you talk about such a young champion with relatively little experience. You know, I can only think back, how many fights has he got, like 12?
I think 11 or 12 fights,
Yeah, so 11 or 12 fights, he's, you know, he's already won the belt and retained the belt in 10 or 11 or 12 fights, you know. The only person I can think of doing that was, what's his name, a heavyweight. I would do this if I could remember names. Brock Lesnar.
Brock Lesnar, yeah.
Yeah, he had like 5 fights. He was champion of the world. Pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what have you made about Anderson Silva's recovery? I don't know if you've been noticing his Instagram posts and videos.
Well, yeah, I followed him, and you know, I know the surgeon that did it, and you know, he got good medical treatment. Everything went well, and he's a phenomenal. You know, he's a freak, obviously, and freaks heal too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's got a little Wolverine gene in him.
Yeah. Would you like to see him make a return to the octagon?
I don't know why. You know, you know, I think, what is he, 38?
He's in his late 30s, yeah.
I think he's already established himself as, you know, right now I think he's the best ever. And then, you know, maybe Jose Aldo could challenge that and be the best ever. Maybe, you know, Jones could challenge that and be the best ever. But right now, you know, he's the best ever. You know, wouldn't you say? Or am I totally wrong?
He's definitely, in my opinion, the greatest of all time, yes.
Yeah, but there's a couple guys active now. Even if GSP came back, he could challenge to perhaps be arguably the best ever. So any of those 3 guys could challenge that, but what's the point? You're 38, you know, everybody tries to deny Father Time. You know, Randy, Tito, Chuck, they all try, and myself, you know, you try and say, oh, no, you know, no. But, you know, you lose a step. And,
do you get the itch to come back?
Man, I did. I get the itch to train more than anything. I just want to work out, and it's tough. I just, you know, there's injuries, and it's tough to work around. It's hard for me. It's like going in to a race. I used to drive a Ferrari, and now I'm driving like a, you know, beat up Toyota. Like I used to, and I see stuff, and I like go to get it, and it's gone. I'm like, or I grab something, and I pull, and nothing happens. I'm like, wow, this isn't as fun as it was. You know, something I always tell people about working out and fighting is, you know, fighting in itself isn't good or bad. It's not fun or unfun. You know, winning's fun. Winning is fun. The feeling that even when you lose and you feel you get better, that's fun. But losing sucks. It's not fun. And when you lose or you get beat up at practice, you know, when you're young, you're like, I'm going to get better. I'm going to, you know, because even though you get beat up, you're getting better. When you're old and you get beat up, you're just getting beat up.
Let's talk about The Ultimate Fighter. Obviously, this year we're seeing the 20th season of The Ultimate Fighter.
And this is the 16 girls, right? 16 girls at 115.
So this is going to introduce the women's strawweight division. Yeah, so this is going to introduce the women's strawweight division. Obviously, we've got Joanne Calderwood here from Scotland. That's going to be a part of that season. But in terms of the actual show itself, how do you feel it's changed since you were on the very first season compared to now, 20 seasons later? There's international seasons and series of the show as well.
Well, the biggest change is people now know what they're getting into. I did not. That's what I would say. The biggest difference is that we didn't know what we were doing, and if you watch it, it's kind of like we seem to be bitching a lot, but we didn't know what we were doing. It was explained to me that there were only going to be like 2 people from each weight class fighting at the end of 8 weeks. Right. So I was in no hurry to get my weight down, you know. So, you know, they know what they're in for. They know they're living in the house. They've seen the show. Hopefully, they know how it's going to be. So, you know, that's the biggest difference.
One of the kind of criticisms of The Ultimate Fighter recently is when champions are involved as one of the coaches. So, for example, in the 20th season coming up, we've got Anthony Pettis versus Gilbert Melendez, but we won't get to see that fight until the end of the year. So it does kind of put the division on hold, the championship on hold for quite a long time. Do you think that the show would be catered best for maybe fighters like BJ Penn and Frankie Edgar, where there's a bit of personal history there, and to kind of showcase that rivalry? Or do you still think that it validates having champions come on the show as coaches?
You know, I think it's a great time for, you know, a champion to rest a little, to kind of catch his breath and rest, and, you know, get that little break from the actual competing themselves. You know, it's a good chance for them to kind of hit a reset. You know, as far as the belt being on hold, yeah, that's something that sucks for the fans. But I feel like they've done a good job with title fights. You know, the UFC is always going to put title fights out there at some level. That's what people want to see. People want to know who the champ is. So there's no shortage of title fights. You know, 155, super competitive weight class. You're putting it on hold till the end of the year. In this instance, particularly, it's going to be good because it'll show us, you know, again, like Michael Johnson, that fight, him and Melvin Guillard, we'll find out who the real contenders are. You know, by that time, the 55 division will have worked itself out, and we'll know who should be fighting for the belt next.
When was the last time you saw Stephan Bonnar?
Who? No. Let's see. We went on a vacation together. Our families went to Sedona for 4 or 5 days about a month ago. Okay.
You had a series going where you guys would talk about, I think it was an upcoming fight on a UFC show in the States. Has there been any talks?
What happened to that?
I wanted to ask you what happened to that.
Thank you. Get on that. Brian Delancey is the producer. Get him on that. He's just so lazy.
Did you enjoy that?
I'm lazy. I'm also very lazy. Yeah, I enjoy sitting. We just sit and, can I cuss on this? Because I'm gonna.
It's on the internet. You say what you want.
Okay, good. We just sit and drink coffee and bullshit, or espressos and bullshit. So it's a pretty easy job. It's a hard job for whoever has to edit it, because we talked for like 4 hours and drank like 16 cups of espresso to where we're shaking, and we're just like talking real fast because things are awesome. But, you know, obviously, yeah.
What's been the most memorable time for you in the youth, or the most memorable moment? Would you say it's winning the Ultimate Fighter, winning the light heavyweight championship, or actually being inducted into the Hall of Fame at the end?
Yeah, it's the beginning. It was that fight, winning the Ultimate Fighter, because that was, for me, that was when life changed. You know, haven't had a job since. Bam, success.
And is that the kind of question that gets asked most? Do people ask you about the Ultimate Fighter? Do you ever get tired of answering that question?
Of course, but, you know, you're going to kick the horse that brought you to the party, you know. It's not a great idea, you know. I mean, I get tired of everything. You get tired of everything. But you know, do I want to go do asphalt again, or go get in a patrol car and work wrecks? No, sir, I do not. So I'll answer questions about fighting until I die.
All right, well, let's talk about this upcoming fight between Alexander Gustafsson and Jimmy Manuwa. It's the first time that the UFC have come back to the O2 Arena in London since Bisping versus Akiyama, and which I think has been, 3 or 4 years now since that last fight. What do you think of that main event?
All right, I'll break it down like this. Jimmy's coach his old coach from town almost had me convinced that he was going to win because of freakish power, but I still think Gustafsson, he's got plenty of power in himself, like as far as physical strength and striking. Gustafsson's got a good chin, so, you know, Jimmy always got a punch a chance against anybody. He can knock anybody out. But if you look at the beating that Kyle Kingsbury took from him, never went out, you know. So I think Gustafsson's got a similarly good chin, you know. And we've seen Gustafsson, the only time we've ever seen him hurt was, you know, we got elbowed in the back of the neck kind of thing, which is a shock for anybody. And that was the shudder. That wasn't actually just having like a P shake there, but it was elbow in the back of the head, or something weird happened. Don't worry about that. But so I think his chin's good, his whiskers are good. You guys say whiskers here a lot. That's what everybody kept saying.
First I've heard of it, but okay.
Holy crap! I'm not even in London. This British guy doesn't even know what he's talking about. No, I'm sorry. So yeah, I think Jimmy will come in. I think he'll close the distance, be aggressive because he won't like Gustafsson's length and movement. And I think when he does close the distance, Gustafsson will take him down with the body lock or something of that nature. Because, you know, Gustafsson's got underestimated wrestling. You know, well, he doesn't actually after he took Jones down, but he, you know, he works with Phil Davis a lot. He actually trains. He's a good wrestler, believe it or not. Unfortunately for the rest of the 205 division. So I think he'll be able to take Jimmy down if Jimmy gets, you know, throws those kicks that he's so good at and gets loose.
And looking a bit further ahead, we've obviously got John Jones defending his light heavyweight championship against Glover Teixeira. So how do you see that fight breaking down? Do you think Glover's got a chance to beat John Jones?
He does. You know, he's got everything. You know, he's got every part of the game, but he's not a master of anything really. I think that Jones is maybe quicker and longer, and I think Jones always comes in with a good game plan. He's not going to give him an opportunity to put him on his back to take him down, and I don't know that he's going to get close enough for Glover to hit him. Although that's a long way away. I hadn't even thought about it until then.
Fair enough. Well, obviously, you think that Alexander Gustafsson's going to beat Jimmy Manuwa, and you think that John Jones will potentially beat Glover Teixeira. So if you're UFC matchmaker Joe Silva, and if the stars align, would you rather see this year John Jones defend his championship belt against Alexander Gustafsson, or would you rather see him defend it against Daniel Cormier? Which fight for you is a more interesting fight?
I think you got to go Gustafsson just because the first match was so good, you know, and you know, I think that's the one people want to see. I think everybody's interested what Cormier is about. He's about a lot of, you know, he's about a badassness, what he is. But I think, you know, you give it to the guy that's kind of already been there and fought for the belt at that weight. So, you know, then that leaves, what do you do with Cormier? Who's he fight, you know? So.
I think Cormier's come out and said that Phil Davis and Rumble Johnson might be a good fight for him. So maybe he'll get the winner of those two.
Yeah, that's an interesting fight too.